Well, thank everyone coming to the meeting tonight. We have a meeting of the Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee. Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024, 5 p.m. We're starting the meeting at about 3 minutes after 5. So I'll make sure we have a quorum. Before we do that, let me back up a little bit and digress. Thank you everyone for coming out, and if you have anything to speak about, we'll give you an opportunity to do that. Please silence your phones so that we don't have any interruptions during the meeting. Can we see if we have a quorum? I don't know who's calling it.
Mr. Coates?
Here.
Miss Sandifer? Here. Mr. Shavers?
Here.
Mr. Erdy?
Here.
All present.
All present, we do have a quorum. So, if there's no opposition to this, we want to skip old business and go straight to new business. Does anyone have any opposition to that?
We're coming back to old business.
We'll be coming back to that as soon as Mr. Goff gets here. Nope.
I'm good with it.
All right. No disagreements on that, so we're going to move to new business. That's discussion of an ordinance, rules and regulations for Parks and Recreation District number 3, and that's going to be presented by John Wascom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be quick. What I've put together is in what I think is a final, I think y'all have a copy of it, the final draft or final form of an ordinance. I'll make a quick recap. I was approached, and another member of the council, Mr. Taylor, was approached by some of the Parks and Recreation members. Here's a problem that they're having. They would have a walking track, and that people are using it to walk on, and then somebody shows up, some man shows up and starts riding bicycle on it, or a couple bicycles. I'm not sure all the details, but it causes a problem with the people trying to walk it. There are designated areas for bicycles, but evidently they chose to use the walking track, and so the park director that's appointed gets there, and they say, look, you can't ride bicycles on a walking track. You have to use the bicycle track. And well, this is public property, that person might say, and you ain't not going to tell me what to do. And so I'm not leaving. So they call the sheriff's office, and the sheriff shows up and says, it's public property, and there's technically no law that says I can remove them. And let me say this, I'm really proud of a sheriff, of our Livingston law enforcement, because with today, news clips all across the nation, you see, I think, law enforcement overextend their boundaries, and they take, so many times they do things that technically are not legal. And I'm really proud that our Livingston Parish deputies and law enforcement realize that they're to uphold the law within the boundaries of the law, and I just think that's fantastic. And so they get there and they say, they're technically not a law, so there's no ordinance. So what I've done, I got with Mr. Taylor, District 3, who covers that park, and we put together an ordinance. So we spoke about it, and I think it's a good ordinance, but it doesn't encompass just that specific Parks and Recreation District. It would cover the whole parish. So what I've done, I've drafted this up, and we've tossed it around 2 or 3 times. So if you'll take just a second, I'll just read through some of the quick things real quick. Whereas the parks and recreation districts throughout Livingston Parish are for enjoyment and betterment of all Livingston Parish residents, and whereas the parks and recreation districts within Livingston Parish must provide a safe and wholesome environment for all parish residents, and whereas the Livingston Parish Council has appointed board members, which in turn have appointed a park director to employ rules and regulations to ensure the safety, health, and welfare of the residents and the visitors to that park. So whereas the director and the board of all districts would like to have these rules and regulations and policies of these districts enforced by local law enforcement. And as legislators, I think it's good legislation. So the ordinance wraps up and says, now therefore be it ordained by the governing authority of the Livingston Parish, State of Louisiana, that all rules, regulations, and policies, this is important, that are voted on by the Parks and Recreation District board members and are posted within plain sight must be adhered to by all visitors that are located within the premises of the Park and Recreation District. These rules and regulations and policies shall be enforced by local law enforcement. So I've tried to keep it concise and simple for visitors and for law enforcement if they show up, that if the director, under the leadership of the board members that we, the council, have appointed, that if they have a sign and it's posted clear in plain sight, that our deputies can have the ability to remove someone or to make sure that they don't ride the bicycle on the track or remove them from that facility if need be. You know, so many times I think across the nation, police officers show up and wouldn't even ask the question, is there a law? He'd just take them off and haul them off. I really admire our law enforcement by following the law. So as legislators, it's our job to provide good legislation. I think this is great legislation, and I'd like for y'all to send a favorable recommendation to the council, and then from there we could, you know, maybe tweak it, or if y'all have any more thoughts that I'm not thinking about, let me know. But I think it's a good ordinance, and we've had a lot of input from people. So
I do. I've got one suggestion. I think it's a great idea what you're doing, but I've got some questions. So we're going back to the bike situation. Somebody's walking the track, somebody gets on a bike and drives on the, what is the enforcement to that? What's going to happen to that individual? Because obviously you have rules, but you don't have, if you break these rules, this is what happens. Sure.
That's a good question. And in the ordinance, I think Mr. Moody, our current parish attorney, said for basic ordinances like this, you have like a $500 fine. Now that's a maximum of $500 fine with 10 days in jail or something. So I actually considered putting in here, and I don't see it on here, but I think it might be my fault that it's not in here, but I would like to change that to add the stipulation that it would be a maximum of 1 day in jail, or basically, no, let me rephrase that, a maximum of a $100 fine with a maximum of 7-day community service, no jail time. So basically what we're doing is we're putting a maximum that the judge can fine someone or punish someone for not doing that. I'd like to take jail out of it and not have a $500 fine, maybe the maximum of $100 and then a week, the maximum of a week community service, picking up trash or something like that. So most ordinances you'll find have the limitations that, to answer your question, most ordinances have that. I don't see it in here, but I'd love to see that added in there.
So would this go on top of our laws? For example, if somebody shows up to the park rule says you cannot have alcohol on the premises, or you can't be intoxicated on the park, let's just say. Our laws say, you know, there's a law for public intoxication. How does that work with the laws that are already set in place versus the park rules? Is that a double fine or a double, or is it just, it goes back to our original law of public intoxication?
Well, I guess it would depend on that. That's a good question, Mr. Shavers. I guess it would be up to the officer who shows up on what charges he wants to enforce. I mean, if he's charging a murder charge there, then he evidently wouldn't go by this.
That's
you know,
right.
if he notices you're breaking the park rule, and I think on the sign I would like to also, if it's posted in plain sight in English, at the bottom that it has a copy of the ordinance or the section paragraph, so the officer sees this is a law. You cannot do that there.
Again, I think it's a great idea. I'm done with the questions, but I do have a suggestion. I think what you need to add in this ordinance is so It doesn't state anything about, this is just adopting the rules and regulations of the park as they are today. If there's any changes from this point going forward, I think that needs to be in here to state and cover that this ordinance will cover rules and regulations from this point going forward, or a blanket to where if they decide to change a rule, this ordinance covers that change.
That's a good question. I thought of that as well. Mr. Shavers, thank you for bringing that up. So that's why I didn't word it to where it's, if they as a board vote on a policy and they post that sign, then it becomes the law. And if for some reason they build another building or move a track somewhere else, they don't have to come back to us to rewrite another ordinance. So I agree with what you're saying, in that it would cover all. But if the board votes on it, the people that we elect, we appoint to those boards, and then they post it and it's very well understood, then I think that would suffice. And then if they make changes or they build a dog park somewhere, but they don't want dogs in the cafeteria, or something, then as long as they voted on it and it's posted, then it would be a law.
I think it's a good idea, and I think my park would appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shavers. Yep. Does anyone else?
I will say, for a matter of safety, I don't know if you saw, if everybody saw what the Mall of Louisiana did today. You have to be 18 to get in on certain nights of the week.
Really?
Because
I did not know
safety
that.
concerns.
Accompanied by an adult.
Don't get accompanied by an adult.
I get, accompanied by an
18 is the
adult.
limit? Is it minimum or whatever? Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Well, I'm
Sadly,
not
that's the
going
world
that
we
far.
live
You
in.
have to be 18 to go to the park, the local parks and recreation. I'm not necessarily want to do that. I'm just, and I think it's good legislation, so we can, just give our directors, and at some point we have to trust that the people that we appoint will make good decisions and not, Mr. Joe.
Yeah, this ordinance that we got right here in front of us, presented by you, that's going to cover all the rec districts in the parish?
Yes, sir. I made this not exclusive to any one specific district. Now, if y'all want to exclude one, that's fine, but I wouldn't imagine that any parks and recreation in Dillon Springs would be opposed to
That's a great idea.
this.
It really is. I mean, let's get them all. Let's, so across the parish, everybody.
Well, that's what this ordinance does. It says any parks and recreation in Dillon Springs. And, this could very well, other districts might want to pick something up like this that has other districts, but I think this is a good start for parks, so.
I just have a question.
Sure, Mr.
All
Coates.
right. So just to make sure I understand correctly, so we're going to appoint people to the boards.
We have already, yes.
Right, but in
Yes.
the future, we would appoint
Yes.
people to boards.
Yes.
And those people would have the authority to create law through the rules that they set in place. Is that correct?
Well, by them enacting policies and following the procedures that we have just put in place, they have to vote and post the sign, and they would have to be for people that are only on those premises, that they're in charge of protecting and maintaining, yes.
Okay. I'm just not sure of the legality of that, and we don't obviously have an attorney here to ask, but assuming that the legality is not an issue, I'm in support of what you have set forth. That's my only question.
I don't see why any park of any sort, like the recreational, whatever you want to call it, would decline this, but what if one of them wanted to modify it or something like that, say Albany, or
I'm sorry?
if they wanted to modify this ordinance that we try to pass, like out of all the parks and recreations, we're including all of them.
We're including all of them in this ordinance.
So is it automatic they have to and will accept that? I mean...
Well, I mean, if they don't want to vote on a policy and don't want to put a sign up, then they wouldn't, the police officer wouldn't enforce it.
What I do recollect over the years, I've been to many places, and the park makes their rules.
Yes,
the
they
people
do.
who own that park grounds, like down in Chalmette and places I've been in, they got signs up. And the town owns that park. Yeah, and so, but I hope everybody accepts it personally. I hope they do.
I think it's a good thing. And look, if we were this careful about writing laws in this parish, we would be in better shape. Because, there may be something come up in this ordinance that we need to give a variance. And we know what the council thinks about variances. But, I've tried to think everything through this so it's simple. And if we need to tweak it in the future because of a bad policy, then we could do that. But I think in the future, but I've tried to make this as streamlined and as concise as possible.
Well, and just saying something else, I don't think it's any different than enforcing the laws of when you're on library grounds or when you're on government grounds, right. So. And
that's my point. That was what was mentioned a while ago. I didn't think about libraries, but that's a good thing. If someone shows up and says, but hey, you don't have an ordinance to prohibit me from beating my kid in the parking lot or whatever, or causing a scene here.
Right.
I want to build a fire here in the parking lot and roast weenies. I'm just being facetious here.
No, I get it.
Hypothetically. But, this would give, if they, maybe libraries would come to us to adopt this same type of ordinance. But I think this parks is a good trial run to introduce, and then we could play it by ear and see how it goes. And I think it would be good for Livingston Parish.
Any more comments?
There's no reason to the parks and recreation districts and all that to not. Everything is really worded just right,
Mr. Joe, I'm going to take that as a compliment because I worked hard on this.
You did good, John.
I'm going to take that as a compliment.
All right. Does anyone in the public have any comments on this issue? All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to send it to
favorable recommendation to the council, and then it will have to have an introduction, call for a public hearing, and then if anyone else has anything to say, then we'll pick it up. Thank y'all so much for letting me come talk.
Okay.
And I hope y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you. I'll take a vote.
Do you want us to call the vote?
Yeah.
Mr. Coates?
Yes.
Ms. Sandifer?
Yes.
Mr. Shavers?
Yes.
Mr. Erdy?
Yes.
And thank you, Mr. Wascombe, for your dedication and time on this. And the other order of business was Mr. Goff's, and Mr. Goff has not arrived at this time.
Let me try to call him.
If you'd like.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that was yours.
Phone fee.
I thought it was a clock.
Your phone you thought was a clock?
Yeah, it looks just like a little alarm clock. Look, it looks like an alarm clock.
Sitting by you there. Where are we at, Dean?
He's not answering.
All right. Well, that being the case, then I guess, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right.
That's record time, y'all.
Adjourn.
Favor.